So this is our September webinar. It's our part of our Michigan State University Beekeeping Office Hours webinar series. I'm Anna Heck, and I'm an apiculture extension educator.
And I'm Megan Milbrath, and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Entomology and in Large Animal Clinical Sciences.
And we also have Dan Wines, who's our farm manager. Right? And this is an MSU extension program. So we compiled a lot of our resources and kind of recommended articles and videos, web pages on our September Resources for Michigan Beekeepers article. So you can find that online. There's a lot of resources that are useful for beekeepers this time of year. We also just shared some of the American Bee Research Conference proceedings. So this is from a conference that's a national conference. It took place in January 2025, and some of us from Michigan State University presented research or extension work. Bee Culture publishes the proceedings, and they've been available for a little while now, so maybe some of you have seen them, but I think it's really a nice thing if you're interested in knowing what research is going on to go through and read those proceedings. A lot of it is the abstract from the presentations, so you can get a sense of what research and extension work is going on and kind of be up to date on some of the current happenings. I also wanted to promote the Michigan Beekeepers Association Fall Conference. And so that will be on Saturday, October 4th. We are also going to have a pre-conference social event. So that is on Friday, October 3rd in the evening at Bloom Meadworks. The space is limited for that, and you need to register by September 17th, if not sooner, because it may fill up. And then the fall conference will be all day on Saturday, October 4th, 2025 at Washtenaw Community College. Registration's open, and hopefully you get a chance to register and join us there. And the keynote speaker for that conference will be Bill Hesler. All right. There's also a lot of plans in the work for 2026. So here are some of the beekeeping clubs, conferences, and schools that I'm aware of. If there are ones that I'm missing, feel free to send them my way. And some of the dates might be tentative as these groups are nailing things down, but right now we have Grand Rapids Area Bee Club, Holland Area Beekeepers Association, Kalamazoo Bee School, the Michigan Beekeepers Association Spring Conference. That will be on campus on Saturday, February 28th. And then we're doing pre-conference activities the day before, similar to last year. And then Southeastern Michigan Beekeepers Association and Upper Peninsula Beekeeping Conference. We are also planning on doing this webinar series again next year. So we're planning on starting that in April and running through the beekeeping season through September. And so we will have registration open by the spring for you to sign up. If you are signed up and watching the webinars live now, you'll still need to sign up for the new series in 2026. So keep an eye open for that registration. All right, and then we also have some other kind of events that are offered by MSU Extension. So you may, if you haven't already done this class, you may be interested in selling Michigan honey and maple syrup safely. This is a program put on by Extension on some of the rules and regulations and then just best practices to sell a safe and clean product. So those are offered monthly right now. And then another webinar series that MSU Extension is offering is called Immigration Essentials for Farm Employees. For farm employers. So if you are a farm employer, you might be interested in this webinar series. And then just want to acknowledge that we have funding from different sources that supports our work, especially U.S. Department of Agriculture, and then at certain parts of the year, the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development as well. Turn it over to Zach, and he's going to talk a little bit about plants that are in bloom now.
Hello, everyone. So I just come in. So, of course, the first thing you see is my mic on. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine, Zachary.
Okay. So, of course, everywhere you go, you smell and you see the yellow flowers. That's most likely the Solidago canadensis, the Canadian goldenrod. It's the the last main resources for honeybees. And we could actually get a super if it's a good year. So that's blooming everywhere, and I think it's peaking. I took a picture today in front of the PPC. Next slide. And this is what I see. It's almost as tall as myself, and it looks like it's peaking. Yeah. So it's going to go down here from here, maybe another week or two if the weather is cooperating. So yeah, it's a great honey plant and has pollen also. Another one that's important in Michigan is New England aster, which actually I've seen them grow wild when I was fishing in northern Michigan in the past years. So, but mostly planted in the garden. Next one, and this lovely too. A few minor ones, not so important. Well, this one's kind of important. The Seven Sons tree is originally from China, but it's a great bee plant. I think Anna has it in her backyard. People are starting to grow this tree. It's a small tree, and it blooms, of course, late in the season. So it's great for honeybees, give them the last batch of food. But it's not as, you have to plant it, and if I rank it, it's not as important as goldenrod, of course, because just the abundance is lower. But it's a good plant for bees. We just have to plant them more. And it's not invasive, so it's a good choice, even though it's not native. Next. Another one that's native here, it's called, one of the common names called butter and eggs. And you can probably tell why, because it has white and yellow color. So Latin name is Denaria. It's now in the Plantago family, Plantagenaceae. Originally it was in Scrophulariaceae. So it's everywhere, and I've seen bees foraging on it, but it's probably not super attractive to honeybees. Or it could be just goldenrod is too prevalent. Next one. And I put this one here because I did see some near the lilac garden just starting to bloom, but this one I took it in New York just 3 days ago. I was driving through there, and it was everywhere by roadside. I stopped by to see what they are, and I was guessing it's Japanese bamboo or Japanese knotweed. It's an invasive species, but it's a great honey plant for people in the eastern states. In Michigan, I've seen only one bunch growing in the wild, and it's probably another 2 weeks before the whole peak. So hopefully it's not going to be as bad in New York State, in Michigan. I think it's too cold for them or something. It's good for the bees, but it's invasive, so you probably don't want to plant it. Next. And this plant, I think it's native. It's a porcelain berry. I usually see them bloom in July and August, but I was in Ann Arbor yesterday, and I didn't see honeybees. I see a lot of bumblebees, yellow jackets, both-faced hornets foraging on these flowers, and berries are forming. So it's kind of strange. They could bloom for a long time, I guess, during the summer and later in the fall. I think it's a native plant. So in the same family as grapes, Vitaceae. I think I spelled it wrong, Vitaceae. So it'll be Vitaceae. Next one. I think I don't. Then I saw this flower, which I haven't seen before. It's grown in the campus of University of Michigan. And a lot of honeybees. I see 3 bees here in this picture on my cell phone. So it's called iron weed, and some call them iron butterfly. It's a Vernonia in the aster family. So I think that's all. And when I was driving in Boston, I see the Chinese sumac blooming there. I did not check the one in Michigan State. We have one tree. It's probably blooming now too. So that's another one that's could be planted for honeybees. Honeybees love it. It's just like sumac, very attractive to bees, but it's not native, and I think it's not invasive. So I think those are all my slides I have for plants.
Thanks, Zach. And so we'll get to answering your questions here soon. But if you have questions after tonight's webinar and in the off season for beekeeping, you can always feel free to submit them through the Ask Extension form at pollinators.msu.edu/questions. If you have beekeeping questions right now for the webinar, please put them in the Q&A box. And then I'll go ahead and let Dan and Megan give some updates on what they're seeing in bees right now and what management they're doing.
Okay, well, I'll go first. So I've been out in the field all day. So we are finishing up our field work. So where we are in like just a little bit north of Lansing, we have beautiful weather. There definitely was goldenrod in bloom. So it wasn't very robby to be working the bees, which was nice. The colonies we were in didn't seem like they were starting to shut down at all. So we still saw lots of brood. We still saw lots of drones. We still saw, like I said, lots of pollen coming in, the bright orange from goldenrod and white and tan. So they were busy. But that was specific to that place. The beekeeper for that project was taking off honey today. I just finished taking off all of my honey this weekend, so that's a big part of it. And then we're looking at putting on fall treatments. So for that project, we have Viroxan in, which is, again, the longer term oxalic. And then I have Apigard coming. I have some hives with Viroxan in. But what I'm looking for in the fall is something that's in there for a long time, because there I don't want to go in the hives that much. And then also, it is a time of year when there is a lot of risk. There are a lot of colonies that will start crashing around you, and you do have to be aware of what's happening. So I would say the theme of where I'm at right now is pulling off all of the honey, putting on mite treatments, and then mixing up sugar water. So once goldenrod is done, making sure that everybody gets fed.
Yeah, and I would say, very similar to what, Megan's observing and doing. I will say, just around campus general area, historically, we have not um, gotten a lot of goldenrod nectar. There is a pretty good concentration of bees in the area. We do see goldenrod blooming, but I have kind of been seeing robby bees, and if I leave the doors open on a building for any more than a couple minutes, I get bees turning up. So it's not maybe as intense as robbing was a couple weeks ago, because the temperatures are cooler, the bees are a little less active in general, but it's very much bee work is deliberate with a purpose. Get in, get out, do what I need to do. So got all the honey harvested, and been feeding, and have treated through the summer with Formic Pro a couple times and Viroxan through the summer months, and we'll look at kind of make some assessments here in the next couple weeks, where we're at as far as doing another round of fall mite treatment. As Megan mentioned, it's kind of a critical time of year for colonies, and if there are colonies that are collapsing, and our bees potentially interact with other bees out there, so we do want to stay vigilant. Feeling pretty good about where we're at right now with bee health, development of good emergent brood. Good, we're starting to get into the time when we'd expect to see some winter bees coming, lots of pollen coming in. In most places I'm aware of in Michigan, pollen is generally pretty abundant. throughout the year, and particularly in the fall with this. We do get the goldenrod pollen everywhere. I have bees through central Michigan, so that does set them up nicely for the winter. But yeah, a lot of time feeding, mixing syrup, getting them kind of up to winter weight, and doing that early enough so they've got a chance to dry that down for winter. So I like to have the bulk of the feeding done by the end of September. If there's a gallon here and there to top things off, I'm okay with that in October, but I like to have them pretty close to weight by September.
Yeah, and I would say that I am feeding all of my smaller hives right now, that I'm not counting on bringing anything in off of goldenrod. So there is, even if you are, I think it was really nice that Dan mentioned that, like, the goldenrod is very, very patchy throughout the state. And even if you're in the part of the state that has goldenrod, you may not have the main one, the altissima. The altissima and the canadensis are the two that put out like the bulk of the nectar, if they do put out nectar. And so, if you aren't in a place that has like heavy duty, you may have to feed. But even if you are in a place that has heavy duty, you'll want to have feed on those smaller colonies. So we'll start with a couple questions. Oh, so Dan, do you want to start with this one about the feeding? Are you starting with 2-to-1 sugar syrup, or what is the ratio?
In an ideal world, the reality of it is I don't want to heat up that much water and put that much of a burden on hot water and cart buckets of hot water. So I mix as much sugar as I can into it. Probably in reality, it's 1.6 or 1.7, something like that. That's a nice aspect of starting earlier is there's a little more moisture per sugar. The bees have got to do a little more work to dry it down. As I do, if my feeding does carry on into October, then it's probably going to be worth it to me to spend that little extra effort to get the sugar to water ratio higher, so the bees have less work as that drying down window is closing. But yeah, if we're feeding to put weight on the bees, you want to get as much as you can. So 2-to-1 is the conventional this time of year. I've been mixing it up in a drum, and that seems to work well. If I don't get every last little bit of syrup or sugar dissolved, I let it settle for a few minutes, and so then I don't have any sugar in suspension. That I get an inch at the bottom of the drum when I tap buckets off, that stays there. Because if you're feeding, you do want all your sugar dissolved if you're feeding in buckets or something that's got like a filter or like a mesh screen or a perforation that you invert, like a bucket or a jug, so you don't have any granular sugar that's going to clog up those holes and prevent the bees from feeding. But yeah, 2-to-1 is conventional. If you have the time to heat the water and get as much sugar dissolved as you can, that's great.
And then this is an excellent next question, as long as we're talking about where can we buy inexpensive sugar? I get that question a lot. I don't have the fix on inexpensive sugar. I do know that some people have gone to some of the sugar I mean, we are in Michigan, which is the place that sugar comes from. So I do know that people have gone to some of the factories and some have gotten floor sweepings or in bulk from them, both in sugar and syrup. But I personally have never done that. But if someone does have the hookup and wants to let us know, please let us know. All right. So I'm going to go to the top of the questions coming in, and we've gotten a couple questions that have come in from email too. Actually, Zachary, are you still there to answer some?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, there's a question on how to propagate the Seven Suns tree. Do you have any information on that, or no?
I don't have any information. I know the BB tree is difficult to germinate and it gets a wax coating. So you need to do sandpaper or something to get rid of the wax there so the water could get in. But I don't know about Seven Suns tree seeds. I haven't seen them. Maybe Dan or Anna they have a tree in their backyard, they would know. I haven't seen their seeds, so all I've seen is in the botanic garden. I take pictures of beautiful flowers, bees are. So, so I don't know the questions. Yeah. I could,
Okay.
you could probably Google it. And, yeah.
Another
That's
option is to send it through the Ask Extension form, and we can see if one of our tree or plant people can answer it.
Okay. Yeah.
yes, absolutely. All right. Anna, there's a question about using auger holes, which I know the University of Minnesota loves. And so it says, I'll read it as it's specifically written, but I think even just more general in having upper entrances. So, what are your thoughts on using a queen excluder and then drilling a 3/4 inch hole in each of the top supers to allow easier access to supers for the foragers? Would this encourage robbing?
So, when we used them at the University of Minnesota, we just used them in the top hive bodies, but we didn't use them in the supers. And we also used corks to close them up until bees were behind that hole, kind of maintaining that space. So, I'd say that there are some risks to use having holes in the supers, especially later on in the season. Ideally, or usually, if there's bees and brood in those boxes, they will have guard bees around those entrances. And a lot of times, equipment has holes in it too, and bees figure out ways to guard those entrances. But if you have extra entrances that can be extra guarding work for your colony as it's getting smaller in size, or if there's kind of an issue or it's sick. So, I mean, this time of year, you'd if there's robbing, it's an extra entrance for the bees to have to guard.
And I did try this one year, and because I do like having, like, the bees do like having an upper entrance. What I found though is it's not a problem when it was on the hive, but when I went to take honey supers off the hive is when it became like I had them in my truck and then they had a hole that the bees could rob out. Or if I stacked them outside my garage before I was putting them in the, extraction room, they would always get robbed out. So I don't like having holes in the supers, and then also for mouse storage in the winter, but on the boxes, I liked having the upper entrances. And I'm actually, as I rotate boxes through the deep boxes, I'm adding them if they don't have them already. All right. Dan, this person says that they have some crystallized honey from last year. Is it good to feed back to the bees for winter weight? Should they dilute it with water before feeding it back to bees? Or what would you do with crystallized honey?
So I'm assuming this, if they're talking about dilution, it's extracted honey in a jar as opposed to crystallized honey in the
I
comb.
think that's how I took it, but you could probably just answer it both ways because I bet
Yeah,
people are in that situation.
so we don't really want to feed extracted honey back to bees. There's a disease transmission aspect to that, and so we don't really want to feed bees extracted honey. If you've already, especially if you've already gone to the trouble of extracting it, that's honey for you. That's in your pantry. Just because it's crystallized does not mean that you can't consume it. You want to gently warm it up. It will reliquefy. I mean, you can eat it crystallized. It's perfectly fine. But there's lots of resources online of how to gently liquefy it again, a little bit, a pot of warm water, or put it in the oven with the, oven light on. If it is crystallized in the frame, if it's just something you didn't extract or it's from a dead out or something like that, you can give it back to the bees. Again, if you're kind of able to confidently diagnose why did that colony die, it didn't die of disease or something like that, a bacterial disease, where then you certainly wouldn't want to be giving that back to a colony, frames from a diseased colony to another colony. So that would be, again, if you have frames of crystallized honey, giving them to a colony, that's kind of a one-to-one move versus, honey from a lot of colonies in a jar back. That's can kind of be disease transmission. So we generally don't recommend that.
Mhm. All right. There is a question that says, for the general Lansing area, when does the queen mating period end? I know it's never a guarantee, which I like that you added that part because that's true. But if a colony were to lose a queen now and tried to raise an emergency queen, are there still drones flying when she needs them? So and maybe Zachary can chip in with like, in general, some of the environmental cues. I would be really nervous about a queen that wasn't mated by now. And usually, so just my personal thing without data, but for me raising queens, I like everybody to be queen right by the time that the goldenrod blooms, because she does have to, go get mated, but then also lay eggs, and then they have to emerge as the winter bees. And so we also have a question about when colonies start laying winter bees. So just for the practical part, I would like to be done basically by now. So as I'm going out and checking feed and taking off supers and stuff, if they aren't queen right, I am combining them. You maybe could get lucky, but then it would be pretty hard. But Zachary, did you want to talk about like when drones generally get kicked out and when winter bees are starting to get made?
Yeah, so I think this time of the year, some colonies are starting to evicting the drones. But I would say to be betting on the, well, I guess less conservative side, I would say you might have another 2 weeks the queen could mate, because there'll be out of 20 colonies, maybe 2 colonies still have drones. And it's actually counterintuitive that the weak colonies would keep the drones for some reason. Maybe they contribute to thermoregulation. The strong colonies actually keep their drones first. Maybe maybe they're more disposable. They can afford to kick them. But that's what we observed is smaller colonies tend to keep the drones longer. Some actually through the winter. Some, in March, you open the colony, there are drones. So that's very rare, though. So I would say mostly have 2 weeks. But as Megan mentioned, it's also you need to have time to raise the winter bees to have the enough colony size and also winter bees. So winter bees actually basically is the last batch of bees. When they come out, there's very few brood left in the colony. Those would be turned into long-lived bees. It's the lack of brood pheromone. But on the practical side, you don't really have data to know how little brood is, not enough brood to kick them into become foragers and die. So in the field data, we don't have that. In the lab, we just know controlled experiments. If you have a lot of brood, or if you give them brood pheromone, then those bees will not become long-lived. So, but that's probably a colony dilution effect. So if you have 60,000 bees now, and you have one frame of brood still going all the way till I think the brood raising in Michigan probably stops completely around middle December, I'm guessing. So I would be guessing bees emerging from November 1st until December, middle December. Those will be long-lived bees, even though there's a little bit of brood left. Basically, as long as those bees did not participate in brood rearing, then you're fine. You have the last batch of bees that are 20 days, that are 12 days old or less, and those bees will be not winter bees. Yeah, so, but we don't have good data on the colony level, only on the scientific side. They know the brood pheromone would turn the winter bees off, basically, if you have enough brood pheromone. But we don't have a dosage that we can say 2 frames of brood, and if it's less than 2 frames of brood, your bees are going to be winter bees. We can't say that. So we don't know precisely, but I'm guessing. I'm guessing November 1st until
Mhm.
mid-December. So,
Mark your calendar for November 1st. I will say that we did a study for 2 years with the USD lab in Tucson, and we sent them bees because that's the other thing too is you can't look at a bee and know if it's a winter bee. So they, ground them up and looked at the fat bodies to see when winter bees started. And between the 2 years that we did it, even just going in, it was, let's see, last year and the year before, 2 years. Anyway, we had two completely different falls. So one of them, it was really warm, really late into the fall. There was more pollen coming in, and we had like two completely different conditions. So it is when they stop rearing brood, which is related when they stop bringing in pollen, which is related when the weather, the first frost hits, and we
yeah.
can be like a month or many weeks difference between
So
frost.
what's your
So
date? What's the date you had
November
on the
1st,
bed?
just like you said. Just kidding.
Okay,
People
it's a
are going to
good.
be like, MSU says winter bees are
uh,
always on November 1st. So,
I
all
just
right.
said Zach told me this could be wrong. No data. Uh,
Yeah.
But you have data, so maybe you
We
have
have,
a.
I mean, we have some, but our data really showed that it was variable, which makes sense for both bees and Michigan,
Yeah.
that it was really
But
variable.
the thing, logistically, you cannot say it's the last batch of brood because how long? Because the last batch brood could be just a small cluster of brood this big. That's only 1,000 bees. That's not going to make it through the winter.
Yeah, that's,
Basically, you need 30,000 bees that are long-lived bees to be able to make through the Michigan winter. So that 30,000 bees is going to be a longer stretch where there's some sporadic brood still being raised. So that's my thinking, my guesstimate.
yeah, that's true. All right, Anna, do you want to talk bottom boards? So there's a question that says, what is recommended for bottom boards during a Leelanau County winter? Oh, lovely. A solid bottom board, a screen bottom board with the insert, or screen bottom board with no insert.
Oh, so I would recommend just either a solid bottom board or a screen bottom board with an insert. I wouldn't have a screened by itself just because there might be some extra wind or air that can get in and disturb that cluster.
Yeah. And I jumped on board the screen bottom board bandwagon when we thought that was going to be a really, really useful tool for managing Varroa. And, you do have some bees fall through. Mainly nowadays, I use all solid bottom boards, but we still use a lot of screened ones to like check to see if mite treatments are working or to look at mite drop, like mainly to look at mite drop after we do something or for data collection. But they aren't necessarily going to make a huge difference for mite control. All right, there are quite a few questions on Viroxan and mite things. So Dan, how would you decide whether to use Viroxan or Formic Pro in the fall? And you're muted. Yep, you saw it.
So yeah, I look at those two treatments fairly differently, and I will say this is my kind of first season with, say, significant use of Viroxan. We had kind of trialed it a little bit on campus a couple years ago, but this was the first time I, used it in a lot of colonies. And to me, the Viroxan kind of functions as a keep low levels low for an extended period, whereas so more of a not as intense, longer duration spread out for its treatment versus the Formic Pro is pretty sharp and intense for a short window. And so I think, it kind of depends on it depends on where you're at with, do you have a major mite problem right now, which if you do, your chances for successful overwintering are limited anyways. But certainly if you have high mite numbers over a couple percent, I would be looking for a quick knockdown. I would want to get those numbers down as quick as possible. So I would certainly be looking at a Formic Pro there. Um, I've only used the Varoxan through the summer period, so I don't know. It's kind of not part of my plan through the fall here, but that doesn't mean it's not a good possible use there. I just haven't done it. It's a fairly new product, and this is my first year with experience with it. Um, but I kind of view those as say kind of the long keep low levels low, and that's from talking to other beekeepers too. If you have mite problems now, I don't think Varoxan's going to solve your problem. Formic, your odds may still be long because as we just talked about a few minutes ago, this development of winter bees is starting. That period is starting now. It's really critical that those bees develop under low mite pressure, which kind of means low viral pressure, which means they're going to be those healthy, long-lived bees to get through the winter. So, kind of depends where you're at. And there are other options as well for fall treatments, particularly now. Most people, I would assume, have honey off. Maybe you're waiting. You've got some supers on for goldenrod. But there's some more possible treatments you could use as well this fall. But that's kind of how I would view the decision.
And I would say they do complement each other really well. So you can do the Formic and then follow with the Varoxan. The other consideration with the Formic is the temperature range, whereas Varoxan doesn't have a listed temperature range. So I put the link where people can look up the labels, but it'll tell you whether or not you can use that product in the current temperature range. Okay, and then someone said, I think there's a similar question about using Varoxan, and they seemed to work fine. Is there a similar product with the Formic? So the Formic Pro is a 2 week treatment, but that is kind of, the Varoxan's a 42 to 56 day treatment, which is long term. Formic Pro is actually the long term version of formic acid. So formic acid historically had been used just as a flash treatment. So that is kind of the comparable one as like the 2 week one. Okay, and our dear friend Lori LeBombard asked a question that literally happened today about whether or not if people have been singing Varoxan to the tune of the Police singing Roxanne, and that has happened today, and that happens basically every time I do research with Varoxan. So, not going to sing it because I'm sure it's copyrighted. Um, so but the other part of the question is I put Varoxan on my nukes a week ago, so treatment will finish up mid-October. Thoughts on doing a late season oxalic acid and dribble in November? Maybe not necessary. I think I'll say what I think and then other people can chip in. I in my mind the Varoxan, if it is gonna kind of finish up mid-October, and where you are it'll probably be basically done with brood rearing by that point up in the UP. And so, as Zachary mentioned, there could be a little extra tiny bit of bees, but I think the Varoxan does kind of fill that niche of keeping the mites low. The reason it's in there for so long is that, as bees emerge, they come into contact with it. So all of those kind of ending up bees that are emerging would in theory be in contact with it. So if you did the dribble, it would kind of be on extra on top of that. But as Dan mentioned, this is our very first year that it's been on the market. And so we are still learning where it fits in. We do have a very large trial in which Varoxan is used a couple different ways. And I'm hoping that gives us more data for next year. So that's going on right now, but we don't really I don't know of any data about using it in the fall as a way to not use the dribble or the vaporizer, but I don't know why it wouldn't work. So in theory, it does kind of fit that role. All right. How long would you wait after Formic Pro to apply Varoxan? according to the labels, I believe, and maybe Anna can help look this up. The Formic Pro label is sideways on my computer, so I've been like trying to go like this to see. But I believe that you are able to put in, so the Formic Pro label as it stands says you're not allowed to have another treatment in at the same time, but I believe you can put one in immediately after. Anna, do you have information on that?
That's my understanding as well.
Yep. And that's basically what I did this year, is I put Formic Pro in the spring, took it out when I put my honey supers on, added Viroxin on that same day when I pulled the old pads out. All right. And there is another one that says, what happens if the miticide strips are not pulled until spring? So this one, I will tell you that I did reach out to the company because we've been using Viroxin, and one of the things that I find is that they are pretty well propolized in place or are completely chewed into oblivion by the time we go to take them out. The company does say that it is important that you pull them out at the end of their usage. So that would be the one thing that would be kind of a negative to this time of year is that you would be wanting to go down into the brood nest and pull those out. And really the concern with leaving any sort of miticide strip in after the date that they are recommended to, or on the label to be moved out, is just development of resistance. But like I said, the ones that we're going into are, I mean, I see a lot of just chewed into little cardboard dust at the bottom by the time the 56-day treatment is up. All right. This is an open one because this isn't something that I've done. So maybe I'll read it as the question is, and then maybe if people want to say what they would do in this case. So I'll let Dan weigh in first. And they say, I have a weak hive that superseded their queen a few weeks ago. She does not seem to be producing much brood. I want to give her a chance, but worry about winter. I've seen where people use screen separators and stack the weak hive on a strong one to share the heat. What do you recommend?
Yeah, so I think that's a reasonable approach. I would be curious, she does not seem to be producing much brood, and why. I guess I'd want to know a little more about why that is, or learn a little more information on that to kind of determine if it's worth trying to save this colony. If it's a case of, the pattern is poor, and maybe she didn't get well mated, or the colony is under some other sort of stressor where they're just not producing healthy bees, they're not producing a lot of brood, then that's one thing we think, probably lost cause here. If it's not producing a lot of brood and it's because it was a supersedure, it declined in size to where it was fairly small before it was able to produce a queen, get her mated, back laying. And the brood pattern looks good, but it's just a small unit, and maybe the amount of brood is limited by the bee coverage. Either they don't have the foragers to go out and get the resources and the pollen, or as we get into these colder nights, if they've only got 2 frames of bees, their brood nest is just not going to be that big. So if it's a case of kind of small and healthy, then I think this could be a very good case for putting it. You might be able to boost it in the next month or so. I'm a little hesitant this time of year about trying to do major manipulations with hives and giving it too much, especially with small units. They're pretty delicate. You can get robbing going, and but you could try to introduce a few more, a shake of nurse bees from a colony, or a frame of emergent capped brood in there, kind of thing, a little at a time to try to boost it up. So if it's small and healthy, a little boost, and then, say a screen board over a queen right colony, so it's getting some of that heat. That would be kind of a potentially viable path forward.
Anna, did you want to add anything with the little tiny colonies?
Yeah, I haven't tried using the screens like that. I would be inclined, like Dan said, to figure out why it's weak in population and see if there's something I could do to boost it personally. Is normally my approach.
I did try the screens one year, and what I really struggled with was like what you do when you need to check the hive down below and when you make the decision to pull it off. And if the hive down below needs food, it is a pain to have a hive stacked on top of another hive. I would just put it in. I mean, it is kind of, I also kind of count the bees that I'm really counting on making it through. And then you do have some other ones that are just weird, and they didn't get queen right. And those do kind of feel like bonus ones. You can try different stuff and see if you can get little tiny colonies. I don't know, I have 15 nukes going of all different stages of stuff that I'm trying, and you can always try things too. All right, so I think we just have one question left right now, so it looks like we'll kind of end about 7 unless people have some more they want to um, fill in. I think so. This is a follow-up inquiry for last month. I have 2 swarms in late July, and they said they showed good work ethic, which I think is very funny way to write about bees. But they'll not reach their goal of 100 pounds of honey by season's end. Both have around 70 pounds of honey. When is the best time to combine these 2 hives? So I generally do all of my combines well before now. But again, this is Jackson County and then up to kind of MSU territory. So I like to have all my bees kind of set before the goldenrod blooms with the thought that, I take my honey supers off, they can use the goldenrod, or if we don't have goldenrod, this feeding for them to kind of get themselves straight and up to weight. And so I wouldn't be combining anymore unless, again, like we just use the phrase, take your losses in the fall, where you really don't think they're going to make it. And so you might as well just combine them so they don't do a slow, very sad die out and get robbed out. But also having 70 pounds of honey is a pretty good amount of honey at this time of year. So depending where you are in the state and what your weather's like, if you can feed them and get them to fill up right now, 70 pounds is not zero. That's not nothing to shake, I don't know what the phrase is, to sneeze at. But I think that you could feed them up easily to get them up to weight if they're bigger colonies and they do need more food than that. Dan or Anna, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think, 70 pounds is well within range. The 100 pounds is a guideline, first of all. We personally have overwintered single deeps. And I don't think you can physically get more than 70 pounds of honey into if you've got a couple frames of brood as including the feeding time, I don't think you can get more than 70 pounds into them. But yeah, certainly still being kind of early mid-September here, 70 pounds if you want to, a few gallons of feed, it might be a $20 worth of syrup per colony if you can have 2 with a reasonable chance to go through the winter versus combining in 1. But as Megan said, if you decide you do want to combine, I would do that sooner rather than later, to let them have as much time as possible to kind of reconfigure and get into that winter setup.
And that's a really nice segue to our next question, which is, can you get fairly specific on how big a nuke needs to be in order to make it through the winter? This person runs mediums and they have 2 nukes, each with a lot of bees, about 4 frames of brood, 5 to 6 frames with various amounts of nectar and pollen. I can bribe each with a box of honey to top them out. I mean, that basically sounds like a small hive. So the first part of the question is if you can be specific on how big a nuke can be, and I personally cannot. I actually tried to do it where I got a little bit of money to try to look at all the different ways we could make nukes and which ones did best through the winter. And basically the conclusion that I got is that a lot of different styles and sizes did fine, or they all kind of did the same level of pretty good enough that I could make lots of different sizes of nukes go through the winter. What it does depend on is how much food they had in there and how easy it was to get food in there. If you did have a prolonged, very, very cold snap, I would lose more of the smaller ones. But it could get quite cold. And I know people who overwinter 5-frame nukes in Michigan and in Wisconsin and in other cold climates. So there are people who do a 5-frame nuke through the winter. Um, but it isn't, I don't have like specific instructions on how exactly to do it. And what I found, I always overwinter some nukes every year, and I've found that each year is really different on how much they'll fill up and if they get too full or if they, if I have to feed them a lot or if they seem like they're clogging themselves up. But if you have, still 5 to 6 frames of brood and you can put honey on them, they should be absolutely fine. All right, there's a couple thank yous. There is a question that says, can you feed the bees while administering Formic Pro? I will say that on the label says that you cannot. So that is the short answer. But you can call. So with all of these, with the Feroxan, there's a couple questions that have come in about the Feroxan and the Formic Pro. I would very strongly recommend reaching out to the companies a lot. Nod that makes the Formic Pro, they're really awesome to talk to. They have scientists on staff that will actually, they've done the studies. They can speak to the data behind the studies. So they can tell you a lot of times the reasoning behind it. So if you can't find it directly on the label or the company website, you can always reach out to the company directly. They absolutely want you to be using their products correctly. Like it doesn't serve them if you don't know how to do it. So that would be my recommendation. All right. Anna, would insulating be a good strategy if a hive is light on stores?
I don't know that. I mean, maybe if it's really well insulated, that it affects food stores and consumption, but we often don't insulate our hives and see really good survival. We are going to have a speaker at the fall conference who does a lot with insulation and condensing hives, so I think people will be really interested in hearing how he talks about it. Someone else can try to give a better answer than I just did.
No, I think the plug for Bill Hesbach is excellent because he does have opinions. I mean, insulation will definitely not fix starvation. But so Dan and I have been, so we have a indoor wintering facility at MSU that, even better than insulation keeps the bees at a controlled temperature. So basically at 42 degrees, which is their most efficient. And last year, so this year we're going to do a larger trial starting on Monday. But next year but last year we did a little mini trial to get data to get the grant. And we had some hives outside and some hives inside just to look to see what the food difference is. And Dan, do you remember offhand?
It was about a 15% difference, 15% less consumption indoors versus outdoors. So we would want to repeat that over multiple years, but
Yeah,
winters
so that
outside
was
are going to be different. But
kind of that's like best case scenario. So even better than if you did like absolutely everything, like getting this nice indoor wintering facility to control everything. The best we got was last year was a 15%. So it's definitely not going to make a huge difference. So that's all the questions that we have, which is great. Because I haven't even showered since I came out of the field and I would like to go eat some supper. And but thank you for all the really good questions, everyone. And hopefully all you and your bees have a really lovely next couple weeks.
I have a
We'll
question
see a
for
lot
you,
of you at the
Megan.
fall conference. Thanks, everyone.
I have a question for you, Megan. If it's 15% savings for food, how many years does it take to recuperate the cost of indoor facility?
Of the indoor facility, ask us at the end of the study in 2 years and we'll have an economic analysis for you.
Yeah, it probably take 10 years, looks like, to cover the cost.
Well, but it depends on how many hives
How
we
many
can get in
colonies you
there.
have?
Yeah,
How big?
exactly.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
I'll come back with you with the data. Bye.
Okay, bye.